Hello everyone, welcome to Cellopedia, this is Maxim. Today I would like to invite you to explore 6 different techniques you could use to improve sound quality. Instead of following the formula, do it because I told you so, I would like to offer you a chance to explore every part of this technique on your own. And I will show you what kind of disastrous sound you might hear if you forget about certain techniques. Let's tune and dive in. Bow hold. We all need to learn how to hold all the important tools we use in everyday's life. When we eat, most of us had to learn how to hold a fork or spoon or chopsticks. You might think, well, if I don't hold the fork properly, I can still eat and I will not be hungry as far as I have enough food on the table. Wouldn't it apply to the way I'm holding the bowl? And sure enough, you can make some kind of sound even holding the bowl in a fist. It would sound pretty good for a beginner. But then I would suggest to think about yourself as an experienced cellist. You are on stage and ready to play C major concerto by Joseph Haydn. Hear how it would go. I'm afraid your audience will not last more than 30 seconds. And worse yet, if they paid for tickets, they will for sure ask for a refund. To master the proper bow hold doesn't mean that you have to hold the bow the same way as your favorite artist does. We're all different. We have different fingers, hands, cellos, different playing experience. But what unites us is the idea of using our body and the bow in the best way. The proper bow hold should allow you to move the bow along the string and to control its position, following several rules we will discuss later. And generations by generations of cellists proved that it is just impossible to do if you are not paying attention to bow hold and hold it any way you like. Every teacher likes to teach students to hold the bow in a very particular way. But most of the teachers would agree that your bow hold has to be fairly relaxed, that your wrist has to be round, and you should avoid sticking your thumb far into the frog, so you could almost see it from the other end like this. Here is the basic bow hold position. You put your fingers like this, your middle finger is touching this ring on the bow, and your thumb just follows other fingers. It has to be slightly curved and touching the frog somewhere where it meets with the stick. For most of the beginners, it's quite uncomfortable to hold the bow like this while it is in the air, but once you put it on the string, you will feel it much more balanced. And this is the way it will work. Make sure that your fingers are slightly curved and you are not gripping the bow too tightly. Remember, balance is key, and flexibility and control go hand in hand. Try to spend every day just paying attention to the position of each finger and the overall balance of your hand. When you work on every part of your bow technique, it is extremely productive to play on open strings. And sooner than later, you will hear significant improvement in your sound. Bow pressure. In fact, it's somewhat prohibited word in cello teaching. When you think about pressure, you right away imagine squeaky sound. And that's true when you are using too much of force. The best way to figure out how much pressure, or we better call it energy, you should apply to the string is to experiment. You prepare the bow, you start moving it, and you're trying to go into the string. And you might hear sound like this. I could even feel that this string started to resist the bow, as if it was fighting with it. And it wasn't able to vibrate properly. This is why we could hear those ugly interruptions in the sound. Then you try to apply much less energy. And you hear somewhat nicer sound, but it doesn't have a core. It sounds too distant, doesn't have much of the character or quality in it. And then you still remember how it felt like when you put too much energy into string and then too little. You try to find a middle ground. And this might be the sound you will use very often in your playing. We shouldn't forget about the difference between each string, how relatively thin the A string is compared to lower strings, especially the C string. And we need to develop a special touch appropriate for each string. In short, the thinner the string is, the lighter your touch has to be. To show that, I will try to use the same touch for A and C string. You could hear that what was good for A string was not enough at all for the C string. We couldn't even hear the C. It responded as a combination of different partials, harmonics, so the main note C wasn't even there. And we will get the opposite effect if we will use appropriate pressure for C string when you will be playing on A string. You could hear that A string wasn't happy at all. We got extremely tense and pressed sound, which you will use very rarely, only when music calls for this kind of sound. If you went that far, you might be interested in checking out my courses on Udemy. I made several courses for cellists of different levels. If you have a minute or two, please check them out. In the description to this video, you will find a link with a special Cellopedia discount for everyone who would like to enroll to those courses. Bow speed. It is closely related to bow pressure. In fact, you might think about them as two sides of the same coin. Once you get some basic experience about the pressure required to play on each string, you will need to adjust the bow speed, which will be essential for achieving consistent even tone across all strings. Let's see if I try to change bow speed using the same pressure I am applying to the string. I better not continue. So the combination of certain pressure of the bow with slow bow speed was okay, but then if I used the same pressure with much faster bow speed, right away we got very tense and ugly sound. In short, to achieve the similar sound quality while using the faster bow speed, you will need to use less pressure. And it will work the same way in the opposite direction. Once you get used to the certain pressure while playing with a faster bow speed, then if you want to change bow speed to slower, you will need to consider adjusting the bow pressure too. Otherwise, you will get sound like this. No surprise, those adjustments are very tricky. Keep playing, keep listening, and you will get better at it. Straight bowing. I'm sure there were cases where you seem to do everything right. You're holding the bow correctly, you thought you are using proper pressure and bow speed, yet your cello started to squeak. The most probable reason for that would be incorrect bow angle. I feel I'm ready to play. Let's see how it will sound. What's happening? My bow hold seems to be okay. I think I'm using the pressure and bow speed, which should work, yet it sounds extremely squeaky. You could see that my bow was behaving like a ship in a stormy ocean. It was moving up and down, close to the fingerboard and very close to the bridge. I wasn't trying to do it. Seems to be that my bow did that. Well, the reason for that was incorrect choice of the angle. In general, when you move the bow across a string, it has to touch the same point on the string. Later on, you will get familiar with quite a few exceptions for this rule, but for beginner, it's very good idea to observe that. Every string exists in a different dimension. That means you will have to learn to move the bow on each string with a different angle. It might not be that complicated if you consider positioning the bow right in between of those two corners. We call this part of the cello C-bowed, so you need to position the bow right in the middle of this imaginary letter C. When you play on an A string, it should feel as if you are moving your hand away from yourself. When you play on a D string, it will have to be changed a little bit. You can still consider middle of the C bowed as a point of reference for the bow when you play on a D string, and it will work this way. Now, when you move to the G string, your bow position will have to be readjusted, and you should feel that you are moving your right hand this way, a bit closer to your body. And you should think about the middle of this C bowed as a reference point. And when you move to the C string, it's somewhat more extreme position. Again, your bow should be positioned somewhere right in the middle of the C bowed, and your right hand will be extremely close to your body. By the way, sometimes when you play on a C string, you might notice that the bow hair will be touching your leg, even leaving marks from rosin. In order to avoid that, since it will not help you to produce good sound, you should just slightly adjust the cello position, rather than trying to move your right leg somewhere underneath the cello. And to properly master the bow angle, you should remember, besides using all the reference points I just mentioned, the most important goal for you is to keep steady sound and avoid for the bow to move too much up or down on the string. Just observe that and you will find a way to adjust your right hand technique so you will get the best sound you could make. Before we continue, I would like to thank all Cellopedia Patreon supporters. This wonderful group of people helped me to create so many videos, and I am very grateful for all the support. If you consider joining them, you might enjoy special perks I provide for Patreon supporters. To find out more about Cellopedia on Patreon, please check out the link in the description. The contact point. If you just starting playing cello, chances are that you play in the first position. That means you are not making shifts, you are not making the active part of the string much shorter. But later on, when you will get more experience with shifting, you might be confused and upset that all the good habits you already learned, paying attention to the sound quality, to your bow hold, to the speed of the bow, to the pressure, to the angle, might still not allow you to make a good sound. And sometimes this terrible squeaky sound will come back no matter what you do. You got more advanced, you need to pay attention to one more thing. Why don't I play for you G major scale? I will prepare in the best way I can do to play in the first position. I will use consistent bow speed, the same pressure. I will check my bow hold, and I'll be going higher and higher on the fingerboard. And let's see what will happen. Should I continue? Probably not. Is there something wrong with my cello? Do I need to use more rosin, change strings, or maybe my cello has some cracks and it has to be repaired? Before you go over everything on this list, let's try to pay attention to the playing point. In the first position, I started relatively close to the fingerboard and it was perfectly fine. Then, once I started moving to the higher positions, the string, the active part of the string, which actually vibrates, which is the distance between the bridge and the spot you're pressing with your finger, got shorter and shorter. You have to make sure that you maintain the same playing point ratio. That means that the distance between the bridge and the bow has to correspond to the distance between the bow and your playing point. For the open string, it will be the nut here, or if you use your left hand, it will be the distance from the bow to the spot you are pressing with your finger. Since you are going to make a string shorter and shorter while moving to the higher positions, you have to adjust this ratio and move the bow closer and closer to the bridge. This is quite difficult to master. You need to figure out how to do it gradually, so you don't jump from one spot to another with the bow, but you try to move the bow just a little bit with every note in higher and higher position. Here is the example how it should work. You could see that I had my bow in this position, relatively close to the fingerboard, and then, note by note, I moved it closer and closer to the bridge. One of my teachers told me that I should keep the bow as close to the bridge as possible. Of course, that doesn't mean that you have to play every note at the bridge, which in music we call sul panticello. That will give us no joy. But that means that in every position you want to think about moving the bow a little bit closer to the bridge, almost on the edge where it might start to make squeaky sound. And finding this edge is very important. If you don't think about this and always choose the safe placement of the bow very close to the fingerboard, you might avoid squeaky sound in the first few positions, but as a result, your sound will lack brightness and depth. And later on, it will be impossible for you to choose from different kinds of sound, to play advanced cello music like great cello concertos by Haydn, Dvorak, or Saint-Saëns. And the last part of the cello technique I would like to talk with you today is your ability to listen to your body. Of course, not literally, but you have to be very sensitive to the way you're using your shoulders, your upper body, to the way you move while playing, and to the way you breathe. Actually, the ability to pay attention to the way you breathe while performing seems to be one of the most important things which might help you to relax and achieve higher, more consistent performance quality. I like to think about using our breathing as a free energy. Let's try this. We will start the first note just the normal way. Prepare your bow hold, think about the bow angle, and we will play. And then add one more ingredient. Start making the music few seconds before you actually make the first sound. Breathe in and then breathe out. When you breathe in, your shoulders go up. And then when you breathe out, your shoulders will go down. And our hand and elbow and upper arm are attached to our shoulders. And lowering your shoulders when you're exhaling will somewhat lower your bow. And this is the free energy I'm talking about. This technique allowed me to start in more relaxed way. And that seems to be very little difference. But when we become more advanced and start paying more attention to little differences in sound quality, that will become very important to observe. Paying attention to breathing will give you several benefits. It will make sure that your upper body is more relaxed. It will help you to communicate with other musicians playing with you. You breathe, you move, you give more information to everyone who is playing with you. And it will help your audience to enjoy your performance. People in the audience can sense right away if a performer is overly tense. They see someone who barely can breathe, and they feel the same way. They might not realize why it's happening, but they will definitely feel somewhat uncomfortable. They will get tired faster, and they will not appreciate all of your efforts. Give your audience a chance to enjoy. Enjoy playing yourself. Allow your body to breathe, and they will feel rewarded. And you shouldn't only pay attention to the way you breathe when you are performing. Your everyday practicing should give you an opportunity to observe that and to get used to that. And you will feel less tired, your muscles will be less sore, and you will start enjoying playing your cello even more. It is really hard to talk about everything you can do to make your sound special during this short lesson. But I hope that few points I mentioned to you will reinforce your curiosity, and you will become more patient, and you will seek higher quality. And that will help you to develop your special cello sound. Thank you for watching. Come back to Cellopedia. I hope to see you soon.